My spouse is a pet hoarder. It's 6 a.m., and the roosters have been crowing nonstop for the last 2 hours in our sunroom adjacent to our bedroom. I'm now sitting in the basement as flies swarm around me, and I've given up swatting them because there's too many to bother. The basement is the area of the house with the least amount of flies. On top of the rooster noise is the cackle of male quail that reside in our living room. They live in the base of 3 cages that are filled with budgies and cockatiel. When I wake up, I remember to put on my slippers, and I hope I get to them before stepping in dog urine or fresh dog shoot. Our carpet in our master bedroom is saturated in dog urine, with many spots that haven't dried out yet. Yesterday, my wife bought our daughter a new tortoise and a frog. The tortoise will be added to the aquarium with our bearded dragon. The bearded dragon, which is often free to roam the house because my wife feels it will be happier. It is free to poop on our furniture or floor or where it was left out last. As I sit here in my basement, the one place where I do not allow any pets, I'm listening to a rabbit thumping its paws on the floor above me, or it's the sound of it biting and ripping apart our wall or furniture. I'm not sure which noise it is, but I don't care anymore. We have at least 6 rabbits. Their little claws make a loud scraping and tapping noise as they scurry and hop across our laminate floors. The main level of our home is littered in rabbit droppings. The droppings get pushed to the side as our 4 children and us inadvertently kick them around while walking through the main level of our home. The dogs won't likely get let out this morning to go to the bathroom. The smaller dog doesn't even obey the command to go out anymore. He just stares at you confused by your directive. If he does go outside, he just comes back in to find a place to shoot and pee in one of our bedrooms. Our backyard doesn't have much dog shoot because it's mostly in our bedrooms. It will stay there for days on end because there is no expectation that it shouldn't be there. The new smell from the giant rug I bought for the basement has worn off. It smelled like glue and dye, and it drowned out the odors from the dozen chickens that reside in our family and living room. They live in a couple of 36-inch fabric pop-up enclosures filled with pine shavings. It is saturated with chicken shoot and urine and has soaked into our oak hardwood floors, permanently damaging them. The stench is eye-watering. We have a lot of feathered friends here. In our master bedroom are 3 more cages with a variety of exotic birds that sing loudly all day long and leave a permanent mess of seeds on the floor around the cages. They are free to roam, and so our room has droppings along our bed's headboard, on our pillows, along the sides of the doors where they perch, in our bathroom mirrors, and down our shower curtains. Our sunroom has 30-plus chickens, and about 8 or 10 of them are roosters, and the roosters crow all day. This is where the flies breed. They come in through the 40-year-old sliding door that is often left open. This door separates the sunroom from our living area and our kitchen. The flies swarm in, and at any given time, there are dozens of flies in our living space. The heat and humidity bake the sunroom floor, which is covered in chicken shoot and urine, and the odor spreads through the house. Our house is in a suburban neighborhood. We do not live on a farm. In addition to these animals, we have 2 pet rats. They are sweet, but as you would expect, their cage is not well maintained, and it stinks 90% of the time. Our boys' room has a snake and axolotl aquarium. One of our daughters has an algae-covered fish aquarium that we fill with water whenever we hear the filter screech because the water evaporated too low. She also has an unkempt cage with a hamster that is rarely played with. Right now, I'm listening to the mice eat through the foam board insulation in my basement. I want to get rid of them, but it's challenging with all the access to feed throughout the house. They seem to be breeding and entering through the home and at a faster pace than they can be exterminated. I am not a pet person, and this life is driving me nuts. My wife is a pet hoarder and has ADHD. Our backyard is a ghost town of quail cages from last year, when she was really into quail breeding, and we had over 150 living in our backyard. Now there remain broken and half-built cages and mounds of shavings and wood chips that she intended to use as bedding. Scattered in random places in our backyard are household garbage bags of chicken shoot. When you try to lift them, they fall apart, because they weigh 30 to 40 pounds, and the bags have deteriorated from the sun. When challenged, she seems to delight in the frustration it causes me because she is not happy in our marriage. It seems that accumulating animals is bringing her little bits of dopamine with each acquisition. I'm tired of living like this, and I don't know what to do. Our children think this behavior is acceptable, and they often chide me for not being on board with the animals. They say I'm not a pet person. It's true that I'm actually not a pet person, but what we have going on here is irresponsible, unsanitary, and illegal. This is pet cruelty and normalizing neglect of animals. Now for the 1.5 years update. Some of you may remember my post venting and looking for advice on what to do in regards to an extreme animal hoarding situation with my wife, dozens of chickens residing in the home, and a variety of animals roaming outside of cages in the home, feces, and a rampant mice infestation. After posting, I sought therapy and started getting my bearings straightened out. In the midst of setting firm boundaries and beginning the work to clean up literally 2 tons of chicken chute, sand, and pine shavings, and resolving the rodent problem, a call to CPS was made by a third party, and an investigation ensued. Believe it or not, by that time, much of the situation was resolved, animals rehomed, home cleaned, and sanitized. Nothing came of the CPS investigation, and it was pretty quickly closed out. However, the relationship was essentially permanently damaged as my wife continued to deny the problem was out of hand. Deep resentment developed towards each other. Fast forward nearly 12 months, and my wife requested a divorce. We are now separated, awaiting an official legal divorce. I have moved into a very nice home and have the kids 50-50. My physical and mental health has dramatically improved. My kids now have an organized and clean haven. They seem happy. It seems inevitable she may lose custody of the kids at some point altogether. I'm hoping she can keep things in check, but due to the constant denial that there was a problem, it will most likely repeat. I may have no choice but take steps to ensure the children's safety at some point, further disrupting the children's lives from their otherwise loving mother. Limitations on pet quantities and cleanliness standards are written into the divorce settlement agreement. Wife has been in therapy for a couple years in the midst of the hoarding. I guess you could say the therapist was either not savvy to the situation or enabling to an irresponsible level. I'm leaning towards the latter. She became more and more emboldened that I was causing her problems as opposed to looking inward. Her therapist seemed to fuel the delusions as far as I could tell. Anyway, thanks for all your advice and getting me to wake up to the madness I contributed to through inaction. My soon-to-be ex-wife has a bit of an animal obsession, but otherwise is a loving and attentive mother. We share 50-50 custody of 4 children. When we split up last year, I had worked really hard to get the house cleaned up, helped to rehome dozens of animals, and eradicate a mice infestation before moving out. Since then, she has collected dozens of animals again, and the home reeks of animal urine. My oldest child has reported that the mice have returned. There is so much animal feed around the property and inside the home that wild mice have endless food supplies. The dogs are not potty trained, and every caged animal cannot be cleaned regularly enough to keep the odors at bay. When I got the kids for the week, all their belongings, clothing had the strongest pungent odor of dirt and urine. My home is clean and smells fresh, and the kids' belongings made my whole house stink. 2 of my kids are wearing the same clothes day and night for multiple days at a time. I called CPS based on my attorney's advice, and I feel awful about it. It feels and looks vindictive, even though that is not my intent. I feel like garbage and like I'm betraying my kids' mom's trust. I want to co-parent amicably, and I feel like this will take away from that. At the same time, she has a problem that is interfering with raising our children in a safe and sanitary environment. Also, my kids love having all the animals. Granted, they love them, but they don't recognize the amount of time and cost to properly care for them. They just like the excitement of having a bunch of pets animals. This is going to also strain my relationship with the kids to a degree. They don't realize that 1, the animals cannot possibly be cared for adequately. 2, that they are going to school stinking to high heaven. 3, that the home is a health concern for them. 4, they see me as the mean dad that wants to take away all their precious animals, which are a part of the family. Part of me is just scared of the my STBXW, like actually afraid for my safety lol. I don't know if she knows yet, and part of me wants to go over to her house and help her again clean up and tell her again to rehome the animals. I know this is not realistic, as it was the primary source of our arguing in our home when we were together. I told her before moving out that I would always expect that her home be sanitary and not overrun by pets again, but that I would be amicable and fair in our divorce process. Now it just feels like I'm being petty in the process of a difficult divorce, even though logically it's not true, but I can't help shake a yucky feeling about calling CPS. Now for an update. I continued feeling uneasy all day and a bit panicked that before CPS came, that she would be able to conceal, hide, or talk her way out of the situation. I started feeling like I would come out looking worse and the kids would not get a clean home out of the call. CPS talked to all of my kids while at school today. My 3 little ones all reported that they are all fine from what I could tell. I did not pry or ask for more details of their conversation, but just generally asked if the interview was okay and how they felt about it. They all seemed fine and like it was discreet and no big deal. However, my oldest child's visit from the agent was separate as he goes to middle school. He spilled all the beans and complained heavily about the unsanitary conditions in great detail. I did not tell him, warn him, or coach him in any way whatsoever. In fact, I try to not even complain about the home to them, as there is nothing they can do about it, and it therefore would not be helpful. It would only cause them stress. He detailed that he asked his mom to buy a new $10 shirt, and she told him no, she doesn't have the money. He then told the CPS agent that 2 days later, he saw her come home with tons of new chickens and animal supplies. Ouch! I'm saddened that he has been living in those conditions. I feel bad that their mom was probably humiliated by that story being retold to her. My son corroborated every complaint. The only reason I know what he told the agent was that their mom called him tonight and was quizzing him on his interview. I overheard everything he said as I was cleaning the kitchen, and he was right there boldly telling his mom all the things he told the agent. I didn't even know he was interviewed today, as we had a full afternoon of driving to kids' activities and making dinner, rushing to do all the parenting things. Anyway, I am relieved that there was corroboration, and it sounds like this may light a fire under their mom to again make some changes. I feel like this could end up being a regular cycle in the years to come. I hope she hangs in there, finds the courage to recognize there is a legitimate issue and work to get better. I haven't been reached out to by CPS yet, but I suspect to get a call soon, and I hope they are able to convince her that changes have to be made. Am I the idiot for refusing to care for my ex-husband despite my kids' demands? I have been married to my wife Angela for a year, and we're planning our first anniversary celebration with a trip overseas. I was very excited to spend this time with my wife, but unfortunately my ex-husband Dan, recent hospitalization, is putting a damper on my plans. Backstory: I met Dan in college, and we got married shortly after graduating when we found out that I was pregnant. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do, but looking back, it was a bad idea. I resented having to put my career aspirations on hold in order to be the full-time caregiver, and Dan resented having to be the main financial provider. However, this did not stop him from constantly bringing it up whenever I asked him to help with the kids or the home. He also never defended me when his mother would stop by, unannounced, and the household wasn't up to the Queen's standard. I felt so exhausted and trapped, and if it weren't for my kids, Junior, Sarah, Michelle, and Mike, I would have left years ago. Unfortunately, Dan did not have the same values as me and blindsided me with divorce papers. It was a rough process, but after the first year of our divorce being finalized, I got my groove back, and within the next 4 years, I was able to get a nice apartment and good career. Present day. A couple of weeks ago, Dan was rushed to the hospital, and while the doctors were able to save him, his health took a turn for the worse. His wife is now essentially working to provide for their kids, while her parents watch them to save on daycare. I learned all of this through my children, as I do not care to have any direct contact with Dan. But almost every time I talk to them, they always bring up how stressed and tired they are over having to look after their father. I thought I was just being a sympathetic ear. But a couple of days ago, my children came together to confront me about my lack of willingness to offer assistance to their father. And as their mother, I should want to care for him to make their own lives easier. My children know that while I have a full-time job, I can make up my own hours, and they want me to come into his house at least twice a week to make sure he's clean and fed, or pay for a nurse to come do it. I refused, stating that Dan and I have been divorced for years and that their stepmom can handle that. That's when they told me that she didn't care about their dad like they do, and is most likely hoping for him to pass so she can collect on his insurance policy as the legal wife. My daughter Sarah then began to cry and asked me if I cared whether or not she had a dad anymore, while Junior and Mike thought that I was being bitter. Michelle asked me to put them first and that I can reschedule my anniversary trip with Angela. My former in-laws are also calling me to say that I need to do this and that I'd be a horrible mom. Am I the idiot? Now for a few important comments. Commenter: turn this completely around and ask your children, how long are you supposed to put your life on hold? And are you never allowed to be happy and live your life? Tell your children that between the four of them and ex-in-laws, they can split costs of a hired nurse/healthcare professional domestic aid to go to your father's house twice in a week. Why should you pay for his care? You don't have the bandwidth and mental strength to be their father's carer. And it's really manipulative and cruel of them to emotionally coerce you to become your ex's carer. Then OP replied, Dan's parents are retired and rely on him to pay their bills. I'm told that Dan's wife freaked out at the mention of having his parents move in to help save money. And his mom's mobility isn't great, so it's not like she can do all the cooking and cleaning. Absolutely not your job to pay for that either. If he's that bad off, I was thinking hospice or some equivalent, which usually isn't a cost to the family. Such a crappy situation everyone is putting you in. Then OP replied, we're Americans and our healthcare system is terrible, worse if you don't have money. I was told that since my ex made too much money in the past 4 years, he doesn't qualify for assistance. Then OP added, my in-laws think I baby-trapped their precious baby boy because I didn't want to work, so they were happy when he left me. Felt as if he deserved better and accused one of my children of not being his because they didn't look enough like him. Commenter: not the idiot. A whole lot of adults thinking they get to decide how you spend your time and money. Sounds like you have a very entitled family. Then OP replied, to be fair, I used to have a people-pleasing type of mentality because that's how I was raised, and it's taken a lot of time and therapy to be assertive and be consistently firm when setting my boundaries. Comment: why are they expecting more from you than his actual wife? Then OP replied, my children have told me in the past that they've talked to her about this, and she just lashes out at them, saying she's too busy with her new job and being the only parent to her kids. It got to the point where she temporarily banned my children from entering the home for a few days until they apologized to her. Commenter: not the idiot. If I were to guess, I'd say your in-laws are pressuring your kids, saying that their father's wife doesn't care for him and whatnot. What actual evidence your children have that his wife isn't caring for him properly? Maybe her care isn't up to the Queen's standards. Then OP replied, from what I am told, she moved him from out of their shared bed, doesn't help him with his medication, takes the food to his room but won't cut it up into small pieces so it's easier for him to eat, and leaves it on the other side of the room to motivate him to move. She doesn't take him to his appointments, and unless my children, usually my daughters, come by, he's not kept very clean. Now for the 2.5-month update. I forgot about the password to this account, and my stepdaughter showed me what to do. And once I accessed this, I saw that I got a few messages from people asking for an update, so I thought I'd share. First, a few people seem to be confused. So let me be clear. I am a woman who is married to another woman. My own parents passed away years ago, so their opinion is irrelevant. My wife and I both have children from previous relationships, but we didn't meet until after our children were adults, so my wife and I are the only ones who have lived together. Now on to what almost everyone else cares about the most. I went on cruise. It was great, and my wife and I had a really great time. My children were predictably unhappy, and I'm sure that my temporary blocking of them didn't make it better. Most of my children kept calling and telling me that I was a selfish and awful woman for choosing to go on the vacation instead of being there for the family. But, like many of you have stated, I reminded them that their father divorced me, and therefore my obligations to him ended. If it were any of them that had a medical need, I would cancel without question, but I would not for their father. I thought I could leave it at that, but because they kept calling and texting the first 3 days of the trip, and that's when I decided to block. Unfortunately, my ex's health took a turn for the worse, and he had to go back to the hospital, and his lack of proper care triggered an investigation. I didn't know any of this until I unblocked my kids the day I got back, and some of them blamed me. I've come to the conclusion that they're all just mad at the situation, and I'm a convenient villain. I've accepted this because I can understand the fear and anger of facing the idea of losing a parent that you love. I just hope that one day we can all sit down with a family therapist and mediate the situation. However, this did start to trigger my past tendencies of sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for my children, but my wife, therapist, and even a small piece of my inner self had to remind me that my children are adults and that my ex isn't my responsibility. I tried to reach out, and so far, most of my children aren't talking to me and have made it very clear that I will not be able to see my grandchildren as a punishment. It's sad, and I'm still wrestling with the guilt and doubt, but my wife and stepchildren are being very supportive, while my other family is a mix, and most of my friends are neutral. Now for a few important comments. Neutral friends. My friends are neutral in the sense that they don't think it's their business and won't bring it up unless I do. If they do think I should help, they've never explicitly said anything to me directly. Commenter. Info. OP wrote, the lack of proper care for her ex-husband triggered an investigation. Was a lack of proper care suspected in the hospital, or did the nurses and doctors say the ex hadn't properly cared at home? I don't know all the details. My kids didn't say and I didn't ask, but apparently, instead of getting better, he's getting worse because all of the doctor's orders aren't being followed. Comment. Girl, them kids jerks. I honestly think that it's partially my fault because I raised them to believe that mothers should constantly sacrifice for their kids no matter what. So that's what I did, and it's what they expect. Why aren't the kids helping him? To be fair, they were helping out in the beginning, but they've had to take time away from work and their own families to help their father, and the pressure is starting to get to them. I live closer and have much more free time than they do, and I did raise them with the expectation that I would always sacrifice for them when they were growing up. What caring for him would have meant. Not just check on him, but actually take care of him, feed him, wash him, give him his medicines at the appropriate times, help him with his exercises, etc. It would practically be a full-time job, and they wanted me to do it nearly every day as if I don't have a job of my own. Am I the idiot for forcing my neighbor to move his illegal shed so I can build my house? My dad owns a vacant but desirable property in NY. Neither of us currently reside there. He is passing the property along to me so I can build a house to live there. The property has been in my family since 1937. It took about $10 for him to get the title cleaned up with a lawyer. Last spring, I had a survey done that showed the neighbor's shed encroaches on the property by about 7 feet. Setback is 12, so needs to move around 19 back. The neighbor even said to my surveyor that my dad should just sell him the land. With this encroachment, my dad is unable to pass along a clean title to me. And without a clean title, I'm not able to secure a home building loan. I was going to work with the neighbor to amicably remove the shed, but he swiftly blocked my number and didn't answer his door when I was in town last August. I looked into the town codes, and the penalty for the violation is $100 a week. He also does not have a permit for the shed, which is necessary per the town's code of any structure over female 120 skew, requiring a permit. Since I didn't live there, I got the city involved. The building inspector told him to remove the shed from our property. Neighbor ignored and refused for about 5 months. Then the building inspector had the city attorney write him a letter in January giving him 60 days to respond. The inspector has not given us a copy of the letter. We've requested it multiple times now, so I'm unsure of what all was said in the letter. I've also requested that the inspector enforces the penalties as well as an injunction to padlock his shed for further use. Those requests were ignored as well. We didn't hear back for about 90 days from the neighbor after the attorney's letter, but he agreed to move the shed. Woohoo, right? He then said we need to get surveyors to pin where he should move his shed so he doesn't have to do it twice. We have 3 different surveys of the property, and there are pins at each corner. I called our surveyor, and it would be $700 to mark where he should move the shed. I felt that I shouldn't be responsible for getting his shed into compliance. This is his violation, and I've been patiently waiting and delaying an entire year. I don't care if he isn't within the full means of the 12th setback. He just needs it off my property to appease me at this point. Initially, I was willing to get the surveyor out again and pay for it, but my concern is that if we do that, he's still not going to move it in a timely manner and keep moving the goalposts for us. Neighbor even said it would take 5 months after we pin the property. I don't know why he thinks it will take 5 months to move the shed. I called around and got quote from shed movers. One said they could do it next week for $575. I've got a lawyer in my back pocket who will be my last-ditch effort. It's expensive. A letter alone will be $1,500 and will take a long time, so I don't love that idea. He said we could do a revocable license for the bit of land, but I'm not giving the neighbor anything at this point. I want to put a driveway and definitely a fence there now too, so I'll need that land. At this point, I understand why my neighbor is being a jerk. He wants to get away with whatever he can, but I can't understand why the building inspector is letting him get away with everything. Why no penalties? Why no injunctions? He was very unhappy when I called the town clerk and asked for more information because the inspector doesn't answer mine. He's been so ineffective on this, and it's having real repercussions for us. We're renting an HCOL area that we don't like and would love to have made progress this year to move ASAP. The neighbor should have racked up at least $4,400 in penalties so far, and an additional $2 for the 5 months he wants to tack on. I feel like that would invoke actual pressure for him to move it, right? So what is my next step here to get this done ASAP? Is there someone above the inspector with the city that can help me with this? How can I get the town to actually enforce the movement of this shed and its penalties without being such wet noodles about it? Any ideas? Now for a few important comments. Turk Gonzo 75. This is brutal. Once this is all settled and your house is done, you're going to have to live next door to that jerk. IKR, we're budgeting for a very big fence and floodlights. Selp 1965. Does this neighbor have connections with the Guft? Is it a good old boy kind of place? Seems so fishy. You're not the first one to ask this exact same question with the same phrasing. I don't believe so. I think the inspector is just ineffective, but who knows? Commenter. It's on your family's property. I'd burn it down. Yeah, trust me. We've thought about that a million times. So yeah, everyone wants me to burn this shed down, bulldoze it, saw it on the property line, or just move it myself. This is in a small town in NY. I don't want to cause waves with neighbors, and I need the building inspector to not hate me when I build my house. I'm not going to destroy his property, but I'm interested in the moving it myself part. Is it legal for me to do that since he's been given so many notices and the town has ordered it to be moved? If I give him a notice, is that enough, or do we need to have an attorney write a letter? My concern is that our neighbor seems like he's got money to mess with us, and I don't want any repercussions falling on my dad. I'm afraid he'd sue for some kind of damages or trespassing or something. IDK, He's a jerk. Could we be held liable for this, even if we give warning? What are my actual options here, and how to go about this with the lowest risk of repercussions? Now for the 2-month update. So a few weeks back, I went to Home Depot and we bought a Sawzall. We went to the neighbor's property in the middle of the night, and not really. For all you burn-it-downers and Sawzall-it-sayers, my attorney said by no means do anything like that. He said do not touch it in any way, ever. So thank you to everyone for the solid and rational advice of talking to attorneys and, as frustrating as it is, utilizing our government resources as recounted below. So I escalated this with the town and bothered them to no end. I got all the way up to the town supervisor, and he was very frustrated on my behalf. I told him I've been dealing with this situation for a year, that the neighbor has been told to move the shed by the inspector and town attorney, that I've already had 3 surveys of the land to prove the encroachment, and that the property is properly demarcated with pins. He asked why the building inspector was having yet another surveyor go out there, and said he would just have someone measure where the shed needs to be moved using the survey. He says he will personally get involved in this and will give neighbor 1 week to get his shed moved. I get a call back with him later that day with a junior building inspector on the line, and whomp, he totally changes his tune. He said, I have to get a surveyor to go out there to pin the property line again, but specifically next to the shed. They could never answer me why it was my responsibility to pin a specific spot on my property for a shed that shouldn't exist there in the first place, solely for the benefit of the neighbor, figuring out how far back to move his shed to get it into compliance. I'm fuming now, and I also figured out that the senior inspector forgot that I had sent him the 3rd survey showing the encroachment in the spring, which should have begun the penalty violations. He also didn't provide that to the neighbor who needed it and had been asking for it. He just thought I didn't provide the survey. Even the junior inspector was embarrassed and frustrated for his lack of help and thoroughness with my case. At this point, I'm still adamant that I don't want to get another surveyor out there. It will just take too long. I talked to a lawyer that would be less expensive than a surveyor, and pretty much said this was a slam dunk win that would enforce the removal ASAP. We're still trying to tread lightly though, so we don't piss off my future home's building inspector too much with the threats of using an attorney, but we desperately need results. My dad's an engineer and comes up with an idea that we present to the junior inspector. We'll use the shed as the property line pin to mark the setback for the neighbor. The shed is shown on the survey, and we can see where the property line crosses through the shed, so we just need to measure and mark those places IRL. It's stupidly simple, and similar to an idea I mentioned months ago about measuring the setback from the shed, but they approved it. I used the survey's CAD files to set up the measurements for where to pin the property line and 6-month setback lines. In my last post, the setbacks were at 12 front, but changed at some point that month. Another piece of important information that the building inspector forgot to mention to me. When my dad and husband went out to go mark the shed using line of sight, they met up with the neighbor, and he was so unbelievably nice. Mind you, we've all been blocked, ignored, had our no trespassing signs taken down, and been told in the past that we should just sell him the property. Now he's making friends with my husband, giving him a tour of his house, talking Scotch, sharing contractor info with him, etc. I'm baffled hearing this and don't trust it, but welcome it for the moment. Then my husband tells me the neighbor's wife is rude to him and pissed that we didn't get the additional survey, didn't like that we were doing it this way, etc. The neighbor hushes her, and she goes off to pout the rest of the day. My theory is that maybe the wife is the one doing all the blocking and snagging this up. The neighbor apparently had a heart attack earlier this year, so I wonder if she took over his communications. When this first started last year, they mentioned that they tried to buy our property so their son could live on it. Apparently it's just her son, his stepson. I think she drove some of this conflict, and he may be giving it up or just changing his tune after his heart attack. Ever since then, he's been friendly toward us, which I'm relieved about. So after the pinning of the property line and marking the 6 fin setback, the building inspector approved our work and then gave the neighbor another month to get this scheduled with a mover, and finally moved. After about a month and a half, I didn't hear from the inspector, so we gave the town a call. It had been moved. We went forward with our final survey to confirm that our land is clear of encroachments. It's cleared, but the neighbor only moved it 3.6 off the property line, short of the 6 setback. I got a letter today from the building inspector saying he passed it, and the case is officially closed. I absolutely do not care that it's only 3.6 points back instead of 6 prime. I'm just glad he's off my land and can now move forward. But seriously, I don't know how this got approved, but I'm in awe of the incompetence of the inspector. I guess I'll just have to see what all I can get away with too. Anyways, that's my shed saga. Thanks for reading.